Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Weekend Woodworking. So, what I wanted to do today, I've actually got to build some shelves for my wife. And the first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that my table saw and the fence on my table saw was nice and square. I did a few cuts the other day and happened to notice that they looked a little bit out. And so, because of that, I want to be sure that I'm getting that saw and that cut as square as possible before I do anything. What I've got in front of me are just some basic tools that I use to square my table saw. So a few options here, and if you don't have all of these, that's fine. You can get away with a few of them. What I used to use to square my saw to the miter slot, so we want to actually square the blade and square the fence to the miter saw that sits in between the two, typically on the right-hand side of your table saw. And so what I used to use is my combination square, where I would kind of drop it in the miter slot a little bit. So that way this edge here catches that. And then I would put a mark on the saw blade, which is really important. And I would set the depth here and then spin that blade around, move this along the miter slot and check to see if it was the same depth on the backside. And that did work really good. When it comes to woodworking, we don't have to have ultimate precision, but I'm sure, as most of you probably agree, the more precise we can be, the better. So what I decided to do is I got this digital caliper here, and I actually just got this from Amazon. So it's not an incredibly expensive one, but it seems to do the trick. That's all that matters. And then I picked up this little device from Lee Valley Tools online. And this is actually a device called a Mag Pro or Mag Dro, sorry. And what it does is it clips into your miter slot. And then once it clips into your miter slot, you can then take your caliper, put it in like that, and tighten this down. When you tighten this down, it squares that up. And now we can actually slide this digital caliper right along the miter slot. And we can use this just by going like that, with the little tab coming out here to check the depth on the front and back of the blade, but also at the front and the back side, or the infeed and the outfeed of the fence itself. So really neat tool, and that's only about, I think it was about $10 or $15 maybe on Lee Valley Tools. So it was actually really, really cheap. The other thing that I have here is a couple of squares. So in addition to making sure that the blade and the fence are square to the miter slot, I also want to make sure that on the vertical axis, my saw blade is coming up straight. So that is the tilt on the table saw. They're not always 100% accurate. So if I need to do something really quickly, and when I say not accurate, I'm referring to the tilt function on the table saw. If I want to make sure really quickly that it's square, what I'll do is I'll take my little digital gauge here, my digital angle finder, and I'll put it on the table. I'll turn it on, zero it out, and then I'll raise the blade all the way up in the air and stick this to the flat part of the blade, not where the carbide teeth are, and make sure that this sits at 90. So that gives it to me a really rough estimate, which is good. But one of the things that I really like to do is to use my actual square. So I have here a small machinist square, and this thing is dead on. And so I just kind of slide this up to the blade on one of the sides to make sure that there's no gaps here. The other one I have is for when I need a bit of a wider surface that can go across more of the plate, the insert. Then I'll use something like this. And while this is not a machinist square, this is what I use for most of my woodworking projects. As we can see here, that's almost dead accurate. So that is perfect, and it's more than enough for me. So that's just some of the tools that I use. Let's get into it. I'm going to show you how to square this up. All right. So just like I mentioned, I've got my my adapter here that I'm going to put into the miter slot, and I'm going to use my Allen key as well. I'm going to need that to adjust the fence. I'm going to put my caliper into the slot, and I'm going to set it back from that fence just enough so that way I can get a little bit of that extension piece coming out of it. So next here, I did notice that I was a little bit out of square, so I'm just lifting the fence up here, and I'm going to take my Allen key on these set screws here and here. That way I can make the adjustment to push it closer or farther to the miter slot itself on the far end. And this is typical with a lot of fences in how we're actually going to square these up. So now that I've got that done, I'm going to put my fence back into the slot, and we're going to look at setting it up again with that caliper to double check the numbers. So right here, I'm just measuring the distance again, and what I've got to the fence is 1.2080 inches in the front, the infeed side. So we're going to slide that to the back, and just going to push that over to measure the back again because we want to be fairly close here. And what that seems to be registering out at is 1.2045 in the outfeed side, which is a difference of 0.0035 of an inch, which is actually a pretty good measurement. It doesn't have to be 100% precise, but that is more than good enough for what I'm going to need it for. So in this part here, we're going to measure the front distance and back distance of the blade to make sure it's the same right there. I've put a little mark on that blade where I'm going to push the caliper up against, and then we're going to spin that blade back. So right at the front, I've got 1.5985 inches. That rolling the blade back, pushing it at the exact same point, I've got a measurement of 1.5920 inches, which gives me a total difference of 0.0065 inches, and I'm pretty happy with that. So in the next part here, we're going to look at our riving knife. As you can see at the back, there's a small gap here and a gap on the other side as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this insert plate off, and we're gonna take it off. We're gonna take the riving knife out of there. You can see that it's all covered in dirt. And the reason we're gonna do that is to clean the riving knife off, as well as the parts inside here, just to make sure that it's nice and clean. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in some compressed air just to clean this out, get rid of any excess dust and anything that's not going to make the insert plate sit in right or the riving knife sit in right. So we're just going to use the riving knife, pry that casing open a little bit so that way we can get some compressed air in there. And once you've got it blown out pretty good, you can always try fitting the riving knife again and to actually see how it does. The one thing to note is that you may need to do some additional adjustments beyond this if it didn't help the riving knife seat properly in line with the blade. And those adjustments are going to involve using an Allen key to actually get this set up. And so if you can see here, we've still got a little bit of a gap, so we're going to have to make a few adjustments with the Allen key on the riving knife. So now we're just going to we're going to take our Allen key. We're going to make some adjustments on this riving knife so that way we can get this properly aligned. So that way we're not going to have any issues with our pieces of wood catching it as it goes through the saw. Now, just as a bit of a side note, in the event that the blade was not square enough, because this is a contractor saw, the blade and the casing and everything are actually bolted to the underside of the cast iron top. If we needed to move that blade in order to be able to square it up, what you can do is loosen the bolts that hold it to the cast iron tabletop underneath, and then use a rubber mallet just to tap it a little bit. And that's one of the easiest ways to get it to move and then tighten it right back up. So now that we've got those adjustments done, we're going to go through and run a test piece through to see how it does. So in order to do that, I'm going to take this piece of poplar. I'm going to put my feather board up against it. And I will adjust this closer to the blade. I just wanted to get an idea of where it needs to sit. So now I can actually put a little pressure down and move it closer to the blade. It's also important to know you never put a feather board on the back side of the blade because it'll end up pinching and cause some sort of kickback. So for this, I'm going to use my regular push stick because the micro jig is just going to be too close to the blade for my comfort. So we're going to turn this on and we're going to run this piece of poplar through because we want to make sure that it goes nice and smooth. So I'm pushing that in by hand there, and then I'm just taking it over with that push stick. And as you can see, it's just gliding through like butter, which is exactly what we want to see. So absolutely amazing. It looks like it's lined up and in good shape.
Now, if you look at the edge of this board, it's nice and smooth because we've got a nice sharp blade, which is really important. Now I'm going to put a square on it. If you have a look at that machinist square there, we are perfectly dead on in that direction and this direction. So that is telling us that 100% our cut is coming out square, which is amazing.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and it'll help you a little bit with making sure that your table saw is square. It's really really simple to do, but it's important to make sure that when we're doing glue ups or whatnot, that we're getting those straight edges, so that way when we clamp something together, we can actually get some equal pressure on it. Do me a favor and don't forget to like this channel and subscribe to this channel as well. That would be awesome if you can do that. Don't forget to turn that notification bell on, so that way when a new video is put out, you'll get notified about that and you can watch it. All right, we'll see you next time.